I practiced pathology at the Hilton Head Hospital from 1978 until 2008. I also knew Jack, Dr. Jack and Mary Ellen from First Presbyterian Church. One day after church, Jack and I were talking, and it occurred to me that I would tell him about this cadre of retired physicians on the island and see what he thought about it.
The idea just germinated, I would say, over the holidays of 1992. And it was shortly after that time when Jack and Joe Black had the talk about the need here, and Joe suggested that they use retired medical personnel.
At that time, Jack was also talking to me about the need for medical care and the underserved on the island. He began to relate about picking someone up as he wasn't a hitchhiker, but he just picked someone up, and Jack was that way, and asked him about medical care and asked him about his experiences. And he said, I don't have any medical care, and I haven't been to see a doctor. And it touched Dr. Jack's heart for sure, and it certainly did mine. It was something that maybe we could do. That's the way we started off. So Dr. Jack took that and ran with it and did the hard work, and my goodness, you can see the Volunteers in Medicine Clinic today is the product of that, and a lot of other people helping. But
there was a group of retired doctors that used to meet at the hospital once a month to hear one of the practicing physicians talk. And Jack asked if he could speak before this group. And when he proposed the idea of a free clinic using retired medical personnel, 16 of the 29 enthusiastically agreed, providing their life savings would not be put at risk, and they didn't have to pay $1,000 and take a test to prove that they had been practicing medicine for 30 or 40 years. It was a long time before Jack realized or heard that as soon as he left the room, they said, "It's a great idea, but nothing will ever happen."
In the early 1990s, I think it was around the spring of '93, Dr. Jack McConnell went to Kay Black, who really and truly was my mentor for many, many years. We worked together in the Zonta Club of Hilton Head Island, and he came to Kay and said, "We really need some help opening the Volunteers in Medicine Clinic, this dream that Dr. Jack had."
The fascinating thing about Jack McConnell was that he could take a concept and he immediately was able to structure it. He was able to think about what needed to happen and how it needed to happen.
The groundbreaking for them was in 1993. The idea for it, I think most people believe, was pretty much cemented in 1992. The clinic was built for about $450,000. It had two wonderful benefactors, Opal Duke and the Everett family, that generally speaking picked up half the costs each. And that really helped the clinic become successful.
I think the most discouraged he was coming home from that first meeting before the Board of Medical Examiners. And he was really down in the dumps. But he claims as he was riding down 26 and about to turn on to 95 again, it all of a sudden hit him that they had told him how he could do it. They said, "You've got to go to the legislature." And he took it from there.
This has been an amazing success story, I think, in this whole country, which started here. And as I've told several people, it's probably one of the most significant things that I ever did in the legislature is, if you've ever been in that process, you know there's a lot of days that really aren't very rewarding. So something like this came along in the early 90s. South Carolina is a very difficult state to change things in at all, much less change anything that has to do with the medical community. As we started this process, and Jack came to me and Senator Cork at the time, and we started talking about how we could get it done, we basically had to do a massive dodge and weave process to structure this legislation around, in essence, what was for-profit medicine. And as I said, as you can imagine, we met with a little bit of resistance from those who were trying to protect the big guys in the state that were in the medical industry. But all in all, without making it a long story, we were able to pull it off once people understood what it was, once they could wrap their hands around that, in fact, somebody actually was going to give free medical care to people, which was one of our biggest fights, is trying to explain to them this really was free medical care. We got it done.
Once the incorporation came through, then Jack needed to find a permanent board to support the efforts of the organization. And again, it was his magnetic person. As I understand it to this day, that mission statement is always recited before the work of the board begins. And I think it was a way for Jack to start out, and for the people who are involved with VIN today, to make sure that everybody stayed true to the mission of providing the health care.
The other vignette I remember about Jack is when he was finally complete with his job here at VIM and had organized all of the organizing documents and bylaws and all the other tidbits and how-tos into an operations manual. And then it occurred to him that he could replicate the clinic through franchises, perhaps across America.
There are now there have been 107 VIM clinics opened through the Volunteers in Medicine Institute.
For me, it was great to work with Jack. Jack's one of those people that he can kind of talk to you and make you feel like you could do something that when you walked in the room you really weren't sure you could do, and you were trying to figure out a nice way to tell somebody that this isn't going to work. And then you walk away after you talk to Jack and say, we can do this. And we did.
People have sometimes asked me about whether Jack was any kind of a golfer. And indeed, like all golfers, he was challenged by the game. But I'll never forget, he had a pork pie hat perched on his head. It didn't seem to come down on his head. And he would flail away like the rest of us. But then he would muse and curse that there must be a better thing to do with my time. And I think that's what finally got his golf game.
I think you need somebody like Jack, to round up the troops. I mean, in his whole life he did that sort of thing. I'm sure he probably had people telling him that Tylenol wasn't going to work either. But we all know the rest of that story. But that's just Jack's personality. He's just a do it. Don't tell me why you can't do it. Tell me why we can do it.
Even after he had Alzheimer's, right up until the time he went into the care facility, we would come over once a week, and this was his therapy. He'd get his hugs as we made the rounds in the clinic. All the volunteers. It was just very special. No, he never did it for the honor. He did it because he cares so much about the unfortunate people in our society who don't have access to health care. And the honors that have come to him since the clinic opened have just been phenomenal. And the induction into the Hall of Fame is the icing on the cake.